The ash fell like gray snow over Dragonmount, smothering the once sacred peak where Luz Theron Telamon had died and Randall Thor had been reborn. It was not natural ash, not the product of fire or volcano, but the dust of broken prophecy, of a pattern unraveled beyond repair. For 3 centuries, the world had whispered of the Dragon Reborn, of the one who would stand against Shai'tan at Tarmon Gaidon and save the Wheel of Time from destruction. But whispers are just air, and prophecy is just a thread in the pattern, easily cut by the hand of chaos. On that fateful day, Randall Thor fell not to a sword or a weave of the One Power, but to the weight of his own doubt, a crack in his resolve that the Dark One had widened into a chasm. The seals of cuendillar shattered like glass, and the Dark One stepped forth from Shai'ol Ghul not as a shadow or a voice in dreams, but as a tangible force of annihilation, his presence twisting the land and sky into a mockery of creation. This is not the story of victory or redemption, of light pushing back the dark. This is the story of what happens when the Dark One truly wins, when the wheel stops turning and the pattern fades into nothingness. It is a story of ruin and resistance, of loyalty and betrayal, and of the fragile line between hope and despair that even the darkest days cannot erase. To understand the horror of that victory, one must first remember the world that was, the world shaped by the wheel's endless turning. For millennia, the wheel had woven the pattern of existence from the true source, the dual force of Seddon and Seddar that drove creation itself. Moiraine Demandred, the Blue Ajah Aes Sedai who had spent her life seeking the Dragon Reborn, once described the true source as a river, endless and unyielding, with channelers as the water wheels that harnessed its power. The true source cannot be used up, she wrote in her journals, any more than the river can be used up by the wheel of the mill. The source is the river, the Aes Sedai, the water wheel. But when the Dark One broke free, he did not just divert that river. He poisoned it, corrupted it at its source, turning the lifeblood of creation into a tool of destruction. Seddon, the male half of the true source, had already borne the taint of his touch for 3 ages, a rancid oil floating atop pure water that drove male channelers to madness and ruin. Now Seddar, the female half, once safe and pure, fell to the same corruption, a slow rot that seeped into every weave, every channeler, every corner of the world. The Aes Sedai of the White Tower, who had stood as guardians of the light for centuries, found their powers turning against them, their healing weaves leaving scars, their protective shields crumbling like dust. Those who refused to bow to the Dark One were hunted down, their souls torn from their bodies to feed his hunger for chaos. The Westlands, once a tapestry of nations and cultures, fell quickly, each kingdom succumbing to the shadow in its own way. Andor, the realm of lions and queens, crumbled not from external invasion but internal betrayal. The Black Ajah, a secret sect of Aes Sedai dedicated to the Dark One, had long infiltrated the White Tower and the courts of Andor, their numbers growing until 1 in 5 sisters swore allegiance to the Shadow. When the Dark One's power washed over the land, they struck, poisoning Queen Morghese and installing a puppet ruler who bent the knee to Shai'tan without resistance. The Lion Throne, once a symbol of justice and strength, was melted down and reforged into a throne of bone, a gift from the Dark One to his most loyal servant, Mesaana, one of the Forsaken. Cairhien, the nation of topless towers in the Game of Houses, fared no better. Its nobles, masters of intrigue and deception, thought they could outmaneuver the Shadow, striking bargains with the Forsaken to preserve their wealth and power. But the Dark One does not bargain. He consumes. Graendal, the Forsaken who ruled through compulsion and manipulation, swept through Cairhien like a plague, enslaving its nobles with weaves so strong their minds could not survive without her control. The perfect grid of the capital's streets became paths for Trollocs and Myrddraal, and the golden sun of Cairhien's banner was replaced with the black flag of the Shadow, emblazoned with the inverted eye of Shai'tan. The Borderlands, those nations that had stood guard against the Blight for centuries, fought with the fury of the doomed. Malkir, Shi'onar, Arafel, Kandor, Saldea. Their armies clashed with Shadowspawn in battles that lasted for weeks, their soldiers dying by the thousands to buy time for their people to flee. But time was a luxury they did not have. The Blight, once a contained region of corruption, spread like wildfire, its toxic vegetation choking farmlands and its twisted creatures multiplying beyond count. Lan Mandragoran, the uncrowned king of Malkir and Warder, to Moiraine Demandred, fought until his sword broke and his armor was soaked in his own blood. He fell at the Battle of Faldera, his last words a curse upon the Dark One and a prayer for the wheel to turn again. But the wheel did not turn. It had stopped, frozen in place by the Dark One's will, leaving the world trapped in an eternal night. The Aiel Waste, a harsh desert that had forged a people of unyielding strength and honor, became a graveyard. The Aiel, who had once followed the Way of the Leaf, a code of non-violence, had abandoned it centuries ago to fight in the Aiel War. Now they fought again, but this time against an enemy they could not defeat. Ishamael, the Forsaken known as the Father of Lies, had long manipulated the Aiel, planting seeds of doubt in their beliefs and turning clan against clan. When the Dark One's victory came, he offered the Aiel a choice: bow to the Shadow or be eradicated. Most refused. The Shai'tan, a clan already corrupted by greed and violence, accepted Ishamael's offer, becoming the enforcers of the Shadow's rule in the Waste. They hunted down the other clans, killing men, women, and children without mercy. The last stand of the Aiel took place at Rhuidean, the sacred city where their chiefs received their visions. There, thousands of Aiel warriors fought to the death, their bodies piling high around the crystal columns that held the memories of their people. When the battle ended, Rhuidean was burned to the ground, its crystal columns shattered, and the Aiel people were no more, their legacy erased by the Shadow. The Seanchan Empire, a nation of conquerors who had crossed the Arith Ocean to invade the Westlands, initially saw the Dark One's victory as an opportunity. They had long sought to capture and control channelers, using them as weapons called Demandred. When the Shadow fell, they believed they could strike a deal with the Forsaken, offering their domain in exchange for control of the Westlands. But the Seanchan underestimated the Dark One's hunger for power. Demandred, the Forsaken who craved dominion above all else, led a massive army of Shadow Spawn against the Seanchan, crushing their forces at the Battle of Ibudar. The Seanchan Empress was executed, her throne taken by Demandred, who used the Demandred as fodder for his experiments, twisting their powers into something dark and unnatural. The Seanchan's rigid social structure collapsed, their people reduced to slaves, their once great empire a footnote in the history of the Shadow's rule. Amidst the ruin, there were those who refused to surrender, who clung to the hope that the wheel would turn again, that the pattern would reweave itself. They called themselves the Remnant, a ragtag group of survivors that included former Aes Sedai, warders, soldiers, nobles, and common folk. They hid in the ruins of cities, in the depths of forests, in the caves of the spine of the world, doing what they could to resist the Shadow's rule. Among them was Egwene Alvire, the former Amirlan seat of the White Tower, who had escaped the fall of Tar Valon with a small group of loyal sisters. Egwene had once been a farm girl from the Two Rivers, a friend of Randall Thor, Perrin Ibarra, and Mat Calthon. Now she was a leader, a beacon of hope in a world of darkness. She had learned to channel the One Power despite the corruption, finding ways to purify small amounts of Sadar enough to weave basic weaves of healing and protection. She traveled from hideout to hideout, rallying the Remnant, teaching them to fight, to survive, to never lose faith. Another member of the Remnant was Perrin Ibarra, the wolf brother who could communicate with wolves and see through their eyes. Perrin had lost much in the Shadow's victory. His wife, Fael, had been killed during the fall of Cairhien, and his wolf companions had been hunted down by the Shadow Spawn. But he had not lost his resolve. He used his connection to the wolves that remained, a small pack that had fled to the forests of Andor, to gather information about the Shadow's movements. He became the Remnant's eyes and ears, sneaking into Shadow-controlled cities and relaying messages between hideouts. He also became a warrior, his axe cutting down Trollocs and Murdral with the same ferocity as the wolves he fought alongside. Perrin believed that the wolves, creatures of the wild, untouched by the pattern, might hold the key to restarting the wheel. He spent hours talking to them, listening to their howls, hoping to find a clue, a sign that the darkness was not eternal. Mat Calthon, the trickster and gambler who had once carried a cursed dagger and worn a foxhead medallion that protected him from the One Power, was also part of the Remnant. But Mat was not a leader or a warrior like Egwene or Perrin. He was a survivor, pure and simple. He used his quick wit and his luck, a gift from the Old Tongue, to outsmart the Shadow's forces. He stole supplies from Shadow-controlled caravans, sabotaged their weapons, and freed slaves whenever he could. He traveled with a small group of companions, including Tom Merrilin, the gleeman who had once taught him to play the flute and the dagger, and Julin Sandar, the former thief-catcher from Tyr. Mat had no illusions about defeating the Dark One. He knew the odds were impossible, but he refused to give up, if only for the sake of his friends, for the memory of the world that had been. As the years passed, the Remnant grew in numbers, but so did the Shadow's power. The Dark One's corruption spread further, turning rivers to poison, plants to thorns, and animals to monsters. The Forsaken ruled over the world with an iron fist, their powers enhanced by the Dark One's gift of immortality and the corrupted One Power. They fought among themselves for power, each seeking to become the Dark One's most favored servant, but their infighting only strengthened their rule, as the Remnant was forced to avoid multiple threats at once. Aiel, who had been the first Forsaken to escape the Dark One's prison, sought to break the Remnant's spirit, using his ability to enter dreams to torment their leaders. He showed Egwene visions of Rand's failure, of the wheel never turning again. He showed Perrin visions of Fael's death, of the wolves being hunted to extinction. He showed Mat visions of his own death, of the Remnant being crushed beneath the Shadow's heel. But the Remnant did not break. They clung to each other, to their memories, to the hope that one day, somehow, the light would return. In the third year of the Dark One's rule, Egwene made a discovery that gave the Remnant a glimmer of hope. She found a fragment of a prophecy, written in the Old Tongue on a scrap of parchment, hidden in the ruins of the White Tower's library. The prophecy spoke of a spark in the dark, a being who would be born of the pattern's last threads, who would have the power to restart the wheel. Egwene believed that this spark was a child, a baby born to two members of the Remnant who carried the blood of the Dragon Reborn. She searched for this child, traveling across the Westlands, facing countless dangers, but she never found them. Some in the Remnant believed the prophecy was a lie, a trick of the Dark One to give them false hope. Others believed it was true, but that the child had not yet been born. Egwene, for her part, chose to believe. She knew that hope was the only weapon they had left, the only thing that could keep them going in the darkest of days. As this chapter draws to a close, the world remains trapped in the Shadow's grip. The wheel has not turned, the pattern has not reweaved, and the Dark One's rule seems eternal. But the Remnant persists, a small flame in the darkness refusing to be extinguished. Egwene leads them with courage and wisdom, Perrin watches over them with the eyes of wolves, and Mat keeps them laughing with his jokes at his stories. They do not know if they will ever see the light again, if the wheel will ever turn, if the spark in the dark will ever ignite. But they know that they cannot give up. For as long as there is life, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, the Dark One's victory is not complete. The next chapter will delve into the heart of the Shadow's rule, exploring the lives of those who bowed to the Dark One, the corruption of the One Power, and the Forsaken's endless quest for power. We will follow Aiel as he seeks to destroy the Remnant once and for all, and we will learn the truth about the spark in the dark, a truth that could change everything. Will the Remnant find the child before Aiel does? Will the wheel ever turn again? The answers lie in the shadows, waiting to be revealed.